Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this episode of Tutorial Tuesday, we're going to dive into some Premiere Pro basics, and more specifically, Workspaces. So to make this video a little bit more digestible, we're going to cut it up into three main sections. First, we'll talk about what Workspaces are and how they work. Then I'll show you how to control and manipulate Workspaces so that later on you can create your own ones. And lastly, I will show you some of my personal Workspaces and why I have them set up a certain way so that you can learn from that and then again, add to your creativity and create your own workspaces. It's important to me that by the end of this video, you understand why you would change the default workspace, how you can do that, and what the effects can be on your editing and how it can get faster and more effective when you do this. Also, a little side note, in this video, we're zooming in specifically on Premiere Pro, but a lot of the stuff, especially in the beginning of the video, is going to be very basic, so you can apply it not only on Premiere Pro, but also on After Effects or Photoshop, because a lot of Adobe apps essentially work the same way and all work with workspaces and panels. Now, these terms don't necessarily mean anything to you right now, but later on they will. So if you're not necessarily a video editor and you just stumbled upon this video, it is still a good idea to keep watching, I guess, especially the beginning, because you can apply most of this knowledge on other Adobe apps. So if you want to see a specific part of After Effects or Adobe Audition or Photoshop or anything, let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the bell button so you'll be notified when I upload another video. And let me know in the comments down below what you want to see in future Thoughts on Thursdays and future Tutorial Tuesdays. Enough about that, let's just dive into Premiere and see how Workspaces work. All right, so here we are in Premiere Pro, which might look quite familiar to you because the way I have it set up right now is like the way it's set up by default when you open up Premiere or boot up Premiere for the very first time. So before we dive into how workspaces work and everything, I think it's very important that you understand what workspaces are, because that's just a whole lot easier to understand. So if you want to give like a vocabulary dictionary to what a workspace is, you could basically define it as a collection of panels and the position of these panels. Now that sounds very cryptic, so I think it's good if we just dissect that definition. That's just my personal made-up definition, by the way. But essentially, the first part, a collection of panels. Now, what are panels? Let's just dive into that first. So the first part of this video is actually very general, so you can apply most of this just to any Adobe app, so be it Photoshop, After Effects, Illustrator, anything like that. Most of them, except for Lightroom, I think, work with these panels. So essentially, this is going to give you like an understanding of like the autonomy of Adobe apps. So what are panels? Well, the best way to define panels or to explain what they are, I think, is to make the comparison to windows that you have on PC or Mac. Different windows represent different programs, right? You can have a Chrome window open, and you can have like a Word or Pages or Office, whatever, window open when you're like looking at some stuff online whilst working on like some school stuff or whatever. Well, you know, it's a different program, you have different windows, and you can move them around. Now, panels are essentially the exact same thing in Premiere and in other Adobe apps. The only difference is that all panels show everything that you can change in that program. So in the case of Premiere Pro, all the panels are catered to editing video, to change all these kinds of things about video. And that goes in the most broad sense of the word. Like you have a panel that shows the timeline, which is just, you know, obviously where you are in the video, and then some different panels. So it's not just, you know, it's one for color correction. You have one, you have a timeline, you have one that shows you how loud your sound is in decibels. So in the broadest sense, basically every functionality of Premiere Pro is bottled into a panel, meaning that if I were to close all the panels, I would just have like a blank slate. You couldn't do anything with Premiere Pro without those panels, essentially. So as you can see in Premiere Pro here, as I click around, you can see these blue boxes start to show up. Whenever like I click, for example, here on the top right on my face, you can see a blue line comes around it, and that's just like showing the borders of that panel. So you have a panel on the top right here, one on the left, one down here, the timeline, and even like this little toolbar that has like all the different tools, like the cutting tool and the pointer tool and whatever of Premiere Pro is a panel Now, I don't think you can actually close out this one because it's just too essential, right? You would just lose access to certain controls, so you can really take it away. But you know, it is essentially a panel, and the same one on the right here, where you have like the sound meter, essentially in decibels. Here you can see. As I played to the video, I've muted it for audio purposes, but if I unmute it for a second, you can see that it goes up because of, you know, this is showing sound. So that's essentially what panels are, all these little blue boxes. Now let's look at the second part of my made up definition, and that is the position of those panels. That's right, you can move these around, you can dock them, undock them, add some, you can remove some, and we'll get into what exactly that is. And that brings us to the 4 things that you can essentially do with these panels. And the first one being that you can move them around. Now, how do you move them around? Quite easily, you can just have a panel like for example, the timeline here, it says A-roll TT2, tutorial Tuesday 2, and I named it that way. It's the name of my sequence. You don't necessarily have to understand that for this video, but that's why it's called that. If I click on it, like on the name, and I start moving my mouse, so I click and hold and I drag, you can see all these blue squares start to show up. Yay! And that's because I can place it somewhere. So for example, if I put it on the right here and I let go of my mouse button, it moves in between here, and you can see now the sound monitoring thing has just gotten really big, because now it has all this space on the bottom right to fill with something, and it chose to do that with the sound thing. It could have been the toolbar also, but it chose to do the sound thing. Now I can move it back there, so it makes a little bit more sense, like this. But that's essentially how you move them around. Just click, drag, and just drop them wherever you want. So the second thing you can do is you can undock panels. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you look around, you can see that all these panels are sort of like glued together. You just saw with the example, like if I move the timeline up here, it's chosen this time to make the project panel really big. So essentially it's always trying to fill up the entire space. And that's because these panels are all docked together, and you can undock them. And what that essentially means is that, well, imagine 1 or 2 panels just want to live their own life and actually live in a nice faraway country called the second monitor. Now, if you want, you can just click on the 3 little bars here, and you click on undock panel, and you'll see that in this case the timeline again is now like a free form thing that I can move around, and now it resembles a window on PC or Mac even more, because it's really like it's an actual window you can just drag around and move, and you can see that it sort of like hovers above everything else. Again, obviously now the sound thing has tried to fill up the space, and it did. It just made it really wide, but the timeline isn't part of that equation anymore. It's just, if I place it right here now on the top, it's just going to block everything behind it. If I click here, you can see it will stay there. It will never be behind all this madness here. So what we can do now is we can drag this window to a second monitor. Now I'm not recording my second monitor, but you have to trust me that right now I'm dragging it to my second monitor, and now you can't see it obviously anymore, but now it's on my second monitor. If you want something, you know, like the timeline might not necessarily be the best example to move on a second monitor, wouldn't make too much sense in my opinion, but what you can do obviously is, for example, right here you have effect controls, and in the second half of this video we'll go into more specifically what certain panels do. We obviously can't go over all of them, because that would literally mean that we go over all of the options in Premiere in one video, which we're not going to do, but I will show some of the essentials. But I wanted the first half to be like usable for everyone. So, you know, if you're not a video editor, this is still useful knowledge. If you're starting with anything like creative, graphic design, video editing, photo editing, whatever, you're going to most likely stumble upon Adobe pretty quickly. And I'm not saying it's the only software out there, but it's a very popular one. So, and a lot of different softwares kind of work similar. Like this is a pretty basic way of looking at these kinds of softwares, but right now we're focusing on Adobe. But you know, for example, the effect controls, you can click there, undock panel, and just drag it, and you have all your effects on a second monitor. Or maybe I personally think the only reason to do this is if you have another screen to use, because I don't really see the point in having it translucent like that. You know, the one thing you can do with it, let me undock it again, is that obviously now you have the option to minimize it, which will make it go away. So it kind of functions as another window right there. So if you want like something that is just, you know, there every now and then and you just want to minimize it again, I don't necessarily see the purpose of that, but especially if you have a second screen, it makes quite a lot of sense to do this. All right, now the next thing that you can do with panels is resize them, and resizing them goes for both docked and undocked panels. I'll quickly demonstrate both of them. To make it specific and practical, why would you resize them? Well, for me personally, I resize my timeline a lot, especially in the height. And the reason for that is because, for example, in the beginning of my editing, I usually just, in this case, for example, this intro, I just cut up, just removed all the uhs and ums and all the silences. And when I forgot what to say and all the like outtakes, I just cut them out. Later on in the editing process, I might want to add like effects and adjustment layers and all these different fancy things. And right now, as you can see, it's pretty low, and especially in the beginning, like I said, I might want my program up here to be really big, so smaller or like shorter timeline in terms of height, and a bigger program monitor. This also obviously is the way I have it set it up when I'm doing color correction, you know, because if you're color correcting, you want this guy up here to be really, really big, and then you don't necessarily, you know, you're just working with one or two adjustment layers here, so it doesn't really matter. Like I said, later on when you're adding like little special effects and everything, you might care less about what the footage looks like, in the sense that you don't need a very detailed view. So you make this guy taller, and as you can see, the program here, the monitor basically gets smaller, but I have a lot more room up here. So right now it's going only up to V3, video 3, but you can imagine if you look at the space here, it can go up to like video 6 or maybe video 7 if you have like multiple layers going on. If you're, I don't know, editing a vlog or whatever, and you have a lot of B-roll going over some talking head or whatever. And same goes for audio. It's just a lot taller down here as well. So yeah, that might be one of the reasons you'd want to resize your panels. And it's really easy. Just click on a panel and you see the blue border, you hover your mouse over that blue border, and in this case, it's going to show an arrow up and down because you can make it taller or shorter. But if I were to put it on the side here, you'll see that it gets a little arrow pointing left and right, because you can obviously also do this and make it less wide and just like that, like narrower, I guess. So just resizing them is just sort of, you know, doing that. And like I said, you can do this with undocked panels as well. Obviously, you can just go into a little corner. This might feel a little bit more intuitive or more like familiar, because this is essentially exactly the same as how you resize a window on a PC or Mac. The last thing that you can do to panels is obviously add them and remove them. And this might be the most essential part of it all, because, you know, this is like how you can creatively build your own ones. And especially removing them seems very liberating for a lot of people, including myself. When I was starting editing, like I said, it's all very kind of scary and weird and whatever. But if you have, if you just, for example, libraries is something I never really use, so I remove it. Info, same thing, just remove it. And it's just, for example, history might be handy, but for example, markers might be something that you're not necessarily using as a beginner. So you can just close out of that, and that makes it just a lot more, like you have a lot more overview of what's going on. It just makes the software a lot clearer. And again, also goes for After Effects, Photoshop, whatever. Just remove panels, and you can always add them back later. So when you're like looking up a tutorial and you're like, oh, okay, I need that and that panel for it, you can just add it. Which brings us to the next part. You can add panels. If you've removed one and you want it back, or like I said, you're watching a tutorial and they're talking about like how to use markers, for example, I just removed it, I want it back. Now what can I do? I just click on Window, and you can see right here a whole list of all the panels that you can add. Now in this case, we are going for, what did I say, markers, and it's right there under the M. They're in alphabetical order, so it's always easy to find. You click on markers, and it's back where it was right there. And now if I watch the tutorial on markers, I have this panel, and I can just do whatever I want with all these markers. So again, Window, and just click on it to add one, and clicking on the three little bars and closing them. Just really, that's it. It's really that simple. Okay, so now you know how to add, remove, dock, undock, resize, and replace panels, essentially. So now you can go make your own one. So I want to quickly show you how to save your own workspace so that you can, you know, get creative, do your thing, and then save it. So what you do is, once you're happy with the way everything is set up, you again click on Window, then you hover over Workspaces. It's going to be on the top, both on Mac and Windows. and you're going to say save as a new workspace. And if you click on that button, it's going to give you a little prompt box with a text field in it, and you can just name it whatever, and it'll be saved. And then whenever you're coming back into Premiere, you can see up here I have sa edit, sa color, and sa audio, which are like my 3 workspaces, and we'll go over them in a bit. But yeah, you can save them and you have them up here. One thing you might want to do is go into Workspaces and click here on Edit Workspaces, because in here you have like a little bit of a control over which ones come in the bar, and then with bar they mean like up here, and which ones are in the overflow menu, which is like if you click this little arrow up here, you click on that, it shows you a list of all the other ones. Now I have all the default ones in the overflow menu because I rarely use them. I only use my own ones, but you can just put whatever. I think automatically or like by default it will save your custom workspace in the overflow menu. So you might want to come in here to make sure that it's in the bar so you can easily get it. So let's go back into editing, which is like a default one. So here we are back in a default one. So the last thing I will say, and then after that we'll go into the specifics, and then if you're not a video editor, you can just leave this video, because after this point it's not going to be interesting if you're not a video editor. But lastly, before you go, I just want to give you one more tip, and that is if you go into Windows, Workspaces, you can always click on Reset to save layout. So if you did something, like you moved something somewhere and now you've lost something, because you know it can sometimes be very complex and very easy to get lost in all these panels, just Window, Workspaces, Reset to save layout, and it'll just pop back into the way that you have it saved. So don't worry, that's like a master reset button, and that's it essentially. And obviously you can also that's the last thing I'll say, save changes to this workspace. So that works almost essentially the same as like, well, saving anything really. You can save it as a new one, or you can just overwrite your current one. So if you created one and you were like, I saved it, but there's some tweaks I want to give it a couple of tweaks, and then just click on Windows, Workspaces, and save changes to this workspace. All right, let me step in real quick because this video is already getting pretty lengthy. It was getting pretty long, so I decided to cut it up into 2 videos. The first half you saw now was me talking about the autonomy of Adobe Apps and just showing you how panels work. Again, like I said in the video, that knowledge can be applied to all the other Adobe apps, but the idea was to focus on Premiere in the same video. But like I said, it felt already kind of lengthy, so I decided to cut it up into 2 videos. So next week you'll see how I have my workspaces set up in Premiere, and we'll go over some of the basic panels that you have in Premiere. So that'll be focused a lot on Premiere Pro. If you want to see me dissect other Adobe apps, leave a comment down below. Don't forget to rate the video, hit the subscribe button and the bell button, and I'll see you next week. Peace.